Hey y'all, I'm Brian Johnson and I'm one of the pastors of Williamsburg United Methodist Church, and this is our midweek video, a chance to talk about faith, life, scripture, something that's going on in the world. Today, I want to take us back to the book of Esther. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the book of Esther as we began the study that we're doing on the book of Esther here at church. And now, as we're ending that study, I want to look at it from a different perspective. The book of Esther, two things really have stood out for me as we've been studying this in our pastor's Bible study. One is the importance of Esther being a story told that highlights and celebrates a woman as a hero in the story. In much of Scripture, we often think about women not finding a big voice, a big place. It tends to be a story told from the perspective of men often. But if we pay attention, there are these moments where women in a patriarchal culture actually are the heroes of the story. And that's important for a lot of reasons. It's important because we believe that God works through men and women equally, which shouldn't be controversial, but sometimes in this world is. It's also important to remember that in the ancient world, where women were not valued as highly, their voices are significant within Scripture, which is a reminder for us to be on the lookout for God speaking through unexpected people, through folks who we may not be ready to pay attention to. Esther is a hero of the story, even though her culture didn't expect her to be a hero. And so we're called to look for people, to be heroes, to be agents of God's work, to be sharing God's love, whom we may not be expecting to do the work of God in the world, who we may not be expecting to be the folks to show up. God works through unlikely people in unlikely places. God calls all of us equally. Every person is someone who is called and beloved by God. And so the folks who we are not ready and not expecting to welcome and see God's love shine through are often precisely the folks who God is calling and working through. So that's one thing that struck me about Esther. The second thing that I think can be helpful these days is that Esther is a book that has this weird place, particularly in Jewish faith. Esther makes it into the Bible in part because it's essential for the feast of Purim. Purim is this Jewish feast that's kind of like Mardi Gras. It's a whole experience. It involves costumes and a little bit of drinking and partying. And that's a very interesting thing because Esther is a book about a time when the people of Israel, Jewish folks, God's people, were almost exterminated. That's the story Esther tells. There is an evil person, Haman, who seeks to exterminate all the Jewish folks within the kingdom of Persia. And Esther leads this resistance that saves the people. And so Jewish folks across the ages have gathered together and thrown these parties in the face of a story that is kind of scary, a story of danger. And it's particularly relevant when we realize that across history, Jewish folks have been targeted for violence. In the Middle Ages, in all sorts of places, when you think about the Holocaust in the last century, there has been violence against Jewish folks. They've been targeted, they've been minorities in places and been discriminated against. And they gather together to tell this story about a time when they were discriminated against, when they were targeted for violence and survived. Esther is, at a certain level, a story of what it means to live hopefully when the evidence of the world doesn't necessarily point towards optimism, right? And that's something I think we can feel these days, right? We are less than a week removed from violence happening at a house of worship in this country on a Sunday morning. We have seen political violence for years in this country. We've seen dangerous and scary rhetoric of violence. We've seen folks worrying about the future. We've seen division multiplying and scary stuff going on in our world. Sometimes it can be hard to be optimistic. But Esther is a book that reminds us that as God's people, we can hold on to hope even when things feel dark. We can hold on to hope even when it doesn't feel like things are just getting better and better. And the story that we have that the folks at the time of the book of Esther being written didn't have is the story of Jesus, who is a story of light breaking out from darkness, of hope breaking out from hopelessness, resurrection breaking out from death. So we can hold on to hope even when things don't feel bright and sunny and shiny, because we know that God is at work. Esther, and the way it's been celebrated across the ages, is a reminder that God is faithful to God's people, that even in the times of darkness, God's light will shine, that we are invited to join in God's work and to find ways to celebrate goodness even when we're scared. In this country, one of the great witnesses to that is the Black church tradition, that in the face of slavery and Jim Crow and all sorts of segregation and violence, was able to both work for justice and grieve wrongs and also celebrate the joys of life. What does it mean for us to face what's hard in this world, to face what's painful and difficult in this world, and hold on to hope, to latch onto and celebrate moments of joy, and to offer up to the world a vision of what it means to work for good and believe in good, even when things are difficult? So I hope we learn to throw parties like Jewish folks do when they tell the story of the book of Esther. I hope we learn to throw parties that celebrate hope even when stuff feels scary. And I hope we can learn from Esther that God's hope shows up in unexpected places, through unexpected people, and cannot be defeated even when the world seems scary. Peace. Hope you have a great week.